The night sky above Earth burned with unfamiliar stars, their colors smeared by the thin haze of alien atmosphere processors humming in orbit. Myra Hale had been cataloging seismic data on the edge of the evacuation zone when the ground vibrated beneath her boots. She turned just in time to see the shadow fall over her, tall, armored, and utterly silent. The alien warrior moved faster than thought, his gauntleted hand closing around her collar and lifting her from the ground as if gravity itself had loosened its hold on her. Myra tried to shout, but the sound tangled in her throat, fear locking her breath as his eyes glowed like cold embers behind a visor of living metal. Around them, the city lights flickered, drones hovered frozen, and the world seemed to hold its breath. The warrior leaned close, studying her face with a focus that felt heavier than the grip on her collar. A pulse of energy rippled through his armor, passing into her chest, and the last thing she felt before darkness took her was a strange warmth spreading through her neck and jaw. When consciousness slipped away, it felt less like falling and more like being paused between seconds. Myra awoke to a ceiling that curved like the inside of a shell, faintly luminous and humming with restrained power. She tried to sit up and realized her body responded, but something essential was missing. When she opened her mouth to speak, nothing came out, not even a whisper. Panic surged through her veins as she touched her throat, feeling no injury, no swelling, only smooth, unbroken skin. The room was sparse, a resting platform, soft restraints that released as she moved, and walls etched with symbols that shifted when she focused on them. A presence stirred nearby, and the alien warrior stepped into view, his armor less threatening now, yet no less imposing. He inclined his head as if acknowledging her awareness, and a low resonance filled the room, not sound but meaning, pressing directly into her thoughts. "You are safe," the message conveyed without words. Myra shook her head, tears burning her eyes as she tried again to speak, her silence echoing louder than any scream. The warrior introduced himself not with a name, but with a history, images flooding Myra's mind of endless wars, collapsing stars, and civilizations erased by misunderstanding. His people were not conquerors by desire, but by necessity, driven by a threat that devoured entire systems. Earth had been marked not for destruction, but for evaluation, and Myra had been chosen because her neural patterns resonated with an ancient signal buried deep in human biology. The grip on her collar had not been an act of cruelty, but of urgency, a transfer meant to protect her from the shock of awakening. Her voice had been muted because spoken language could not survive the translation process, her mind now attuned to frequencies beyond sound. As the truth settled, Myra tested her new perception, sensing emotions and intentions like currents in water. She realized she could communicate, not with her voice, but with clarity that bypassed lies and fear. The warrior watched patiently, a guardian rather than a captor, waiting for her acceptance. Days passed, or what felt like days, as Myra adapted to her altered state. She learned to project thoughts deliberately, shaping them with care, discovering that silence carried power. Through shared memories, she saw the warrior as he truly was, burdened by duty, haunted by losses, and desperate to prevent another extinction. Together they practiced, refining her ability to bridge human intuition and alien logic. Myra understood now that her role was to become a living translator, a voice between species that could not trust each other's words. Though she mourned her lost speech, she found strength in the deeper connection she had gained. The warrior released her from confinement, getting her through the vessel, showing her the stars not as distant lights, but as fragile homes. For the first time since waking, Myra felt hope rise steady and real. When Myra returned to Earth, escorted by the warrior and his delegation, the world watched in fearful silence. She stood before leaders and soldiers, unable to speak, yet more heard than any shout could have achieved. Her thoughts carried truth unfiltered, conveying the alien warning and the chance for alliance. As humans listened within their minds, fear softened into understanding. The warrior remained at her side, no longer a shadow of terror, but a symbol of fragile trust. Myra realized her silence was not a loss, but an evolution, a new kind of voice born from contact and courage. Between Earth and the stars, she became the bridge that words alone could never build. And in the quiet that followed, two worlds chose survival together. The first thing Myra felt after the world listened was exhaustion deeper than sleep. Standing before humanity with her thoughts laid bare had taken more than strength. It had taken pieces of her she was not sure would ever grow back. The silence inside her was no longer empty. It was crowded with echoes of millions of minds touching hers. As the crowds dispersed and the leaders retreated into hurried councils, Myra remained still, anchored by the presence beside her. The alien warrior did not move away, his armor dimming as if recognizing the weight she carried. Through their shared connection, she felt his concern, sharp and restrained, like a blade kept sheathed by discipline alone. This is only the beginning, his meaning pressed gently into her awareness. She understood without needing clarification. In the days that followed, Earth changed in subtle, terrifying ways. People woke from dreams they could not explain, dreams of stars collapsing and skies burning green. Children stared at the night sky longer than before, pointing at constellations that no longer existed. Myra felt it all, the ripple of awakening spreading through the human collective like a slow pulse. Her presence had acted as a key, unlocking something ancient and dormant within the species. Governments argued over control, scientists demanded access, and religious leaders called her miracle and monster in the same breath. Yet none of them truly understood what had been done to her. The warrior stayed close, guarding her not with weapons but with intent. Whenever hostile thoughts gathered too densely, he stepped forward, and the air itself seemed to tense. Myra learned that fear behaved differently around him, shrinking, retreating, recognizing a predator older than history. At night, when she tried to rest, memories not her own slipped into her thoughts. She saw battlefields beneath red suns, comrades turning to ash mid-step, and commands given that doomed entire populations. The warrior never forced these memories upon her, yet he never fully blocked them either. This too is part of the price he conveyed one night when she recoiled from a particularly violent vision. To stand between worlds is to feel both blade. Myra wanted to ask if he regretted choosing her. The thought itself carried the question, and his response was immediate, unwavering. Never. The certainty struck her harder than any physical blow. She realized then that the moment he had grabbed her collar, lifted her from the ground, and altered her forever, had also altered him. His people valued restraint above all else, and yet he had acted on instinct. She had not been selected by algorithm alone. She had been chosen by him. As weeks passed, the alien delegation expanded its presence in orbit. Massive structures unfolded like metallic petals, dwarfing human satellites with ease. Earth's militaries remained on edge, weapons trained skyward, fingers twitching near triggers that would accomplish nothing. Myra stood between escalation and annihilation more times than she could count. Each misunderstanding threatened to unravel the fragile trust she embodied. When a human fighter jet strayed too close to an alien installation and was disabled, panic surged through global networks. Myra intervened before retaliation could begin, projecting calm, intent, and explanation into both sides. The strain left her trembling, nose bleeding, knees barely holding her upright. The warrior caught her before she fell. His hand closed around her arm with the same strength that once lifted her by the collar, yet now it held restraint, care, and something dangerously close to tenderness. Rest, he urged. But rest was becoming difficult. Myra began to feel the boundary between her mind and others thinning. Random thoughts brushed against her awareness like insects against glass. She learned to shield herself, but shielding required constant effort. Without her voice, silence had once been refuge, now it was exposure. She wondered if this was how the warrior's species lived at all times, bound together by shared awareness, unable to truly be alone. When she asked him, his reply carried sadness. Yes. Loneliness, he explained, was a human luxury. The realization unsettled her more than any alien technology. She had lost her voice, her privacy, and her former life in exchange for preventing war. Was the balance fair? She did not know. The breaking point came without warning. During a joint human-alien summit, a single individual broke through security, driven by fear sharpened into desperation. The weapon he carried was crude, ineffective against alien armor, but devastating to human flesh. Myra sensed his intent a fraction of a second before he acted. Time stretched thin as she reached outward, trying to stop him mentally. The effort tore through her defenses. Pain exploded behind her eyes. The shot rang out. The warrior moved faster than thought. He stepped in front of her, the projectile shattering harmlessly against his armor. But the human behind him was not so fortunate, caught in the chaos, struck by security fire, collapsing in a pool of red that Myra felt like a scream inside her skull. The mental backlash was catastrophic. Hundreds of minds recoiled in horror. Myra collapsed, consciousness fracturing under the weight. She awoke restrained, not physically but mentally, wrapped in layers of alien suppression fields. The warrior knelt beside her, armor scorched, stance rigid with restrained fury. You almost burned yourself out, his meaning carried fear unfiltered. Myra tried to respond, but her thoughts were sluggish, fragmented. She felt smaller somehow, stretched thin, like a bridge overloaded with traffic. That was when she understood the truth he had never spoken aloud. She was not limitless. She was burning up. The silence that followed was heavy. For the first time since her awakening, Myra considered stepping away. Let someone else take her place. Let humanity face the stars without her. The thought felt like betrayal and relief entwined. The warrior sensed it instantly, his presence tightening. If you leave, he conveyed carefully, there will be war not because they wish it, but because they will misunderstand without you. The burden was clear, unbearable in its simplicity. Myra wept without sound, tears sliding down her temples into the sterile surface beneath her. She had become essential, irreplaceable, and expendable all at once. The warrior reached out, resting his hand against her shoulder, a gesture that crossed cultural boundaries. I will not let you burn alone, he promised. The words carried weight beyond reassurance. He was offering something forbidden, a partial bond, a sharing of burden that could weaken them both. Against protocol, against centuries of doctrine, he opened himself further. Myra felt it immediately, the rush of strength, stability, and pain that was not hers flooding into the shared space between them. It hurt more than anything before. But it also balanced her, reinforcing the bridge rather than stretching it thinner. For the first time since losing her voice, Myra felt truly heard. Together they stood again, altered, connected more deeply than either species intended. The cost was high and the future uncertain. But between the warrior who once seized her in silence and the woman who could no longer speak, a new kind of alliance had formed. One forged not by words, but by shared survival.